nobody who's being an honest broker can possibly believe that the Democratic rhetoric is the problem here. So if the issue is that we're saying all the time that he's like Hitler and he's a threat to democracy, and by the way, J.D. Vance has also said that he's like Hitler, and I guess he's redeemed now. But Donald Trump sent a fundraising email just last week that said Joe Biden is a threat to democracy. And only one of these candidates has inspired people who sent pipe bombs to leading Democrats across the country, who has inspired mass shooters. Talk about firing up the base. Donald Trump has been doing that since 2016. Remember when he said the Second Amendment people could take care of it? When he was talking about Hillary Clinton abolishing the Second Amendment and she'll get to appoint judges. He talked about, remember that congressman from Montana who body slammed a reporter and he said, he's my type. He retruthed or whatever it was, a video of Joe Biden hogtied. Just back in
that was hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Your
hilarious.
examples are so tiny.
No,
We're
not.
talking about an attempted assassination that left a man dead.
That was Jessica Tarlov calling out the obvious, that these Republican efforts to pin the blame on the assassination attempt against Donald Trump on the Democrats is just frankly insane. First of all, and I feel like this alone is enough to rebut this narrative, but the shooter is a registered Republican. Reporting from his classmates suggests that not only was he conservative, but defiantly conservative. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that a classmate of the shooter recalled a mock debate in which their history professor posed government policy questions and asked students to stand on one side of the classroom or the other to signal their support or opposition for a given proposal. Quote, the majority of the class were on the liberal side, but Tom, no matter what, always stood his ground on the conservative side. That's still the picture I have of him, just standing alone on one side while the rest of the class was on the other. And of course, there was this report suggesting that there were actually Trump signs in his yard as well.
Investigators dressed in plain clothes as well as FBI agents approach this house. That's where the family of Thomas Crooks lives, which is right here on Milford Drive. Then we started to see those agents going door to door, canvassing the neighborhood and speaking with people who live here. They're trying to get answers to the many questions that still remain. Crooks's motive is still unclear. Records show he is a registered Republican, and neighbors today told us that they've actually seen Trump signs outside of the home over the course of the last few years.
Neighbor Kelly Little had few answers for the FBI and just as many questions herself. She said until recently there were pro-Trump signs in the Crooks' front yard.
There absolutely was MAGA supporting things for a while.
And here's further reporting now from Channel 4 regarding this issue.
Channel 4 News can reveal that Thomas Crooks' father, the owner of the rifle that was used to shoot at Donald Trump, was held on a database and profiled by the former president's election campaign and identified by them as a strong Republican supporter, gun owner and hunter. The information was compiled as part of a secret Republican project to gather data on millions of gun owners across America and use it to target pro-gun messages in the run-up to the 2016 election.
And here's why they did it. The city of Pittsburgh is a key battleground in the critical swing state of Pennsylvania, so voters here are always heavily profiled and targeted by political parties, like the Trump campaign in 2016, which held voters' details on a database, including, as we've discovered, the shooter's family, Matthew Crooks and his wife Mary, who lived here at 2506 Milford Drive in Bethel Park. We know they profiled them using secret computer models to identify likely gun owners and enthusiasts, and Mr. Crooks scored very highly, 0.99 out of 1 for being a gun owner and 0.95 out of 1 for being a hunter. In fact, out of more than 19,000 people in Bethel Park who were profiled, Mr. Crooks was in the top 20, and the database classified him as a strong GOP or Republican voter.
And here's another point worth making up top. It is not the Democrats' fault that there was an assassination attempt against Donald Trump because the Democrats called Donald Trump a fascist. That is gaslighting 101. We are not only correct, but encouraged to rightly acknowledge that Donald Trump is indeed a fascist, because he is. He vowed to terminate the Constitution, his words. He said he would be a dictator, his words. He said he wants to turn 50,000 civil servants into political appointees who would be loyal only to him. Rightly acknowledging Trump's desire to be a dictator is nothing to be ashamed of. It is our duty to do so. In fact, Trump being a fascist is so evident and so true that, as Jessica pointed out, even J.D. Vance himself said it. it. Here's what Donald Trump's own VP pick said just a couple of years back. Quote, "I'm not surprised by Trump's rise, and I think the entire party has only itself to blame. We are, whether you like it or not, the party of lower income, lower education white people, and they've been saying for a long time that we need to offer those people something, and hell, maybe even expand our appeal to working class black people in the process, or a demagogue would. We are now at that point. Trump is the fruit of the party's collective neglect. I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical asshole like Nixon who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging?" And yet, strangely, no Republicans are blaming J.D. Vance for the shooting, even though he himself called Trump America's Hitler, who is the most infamous fascist in history. So either J.D. Vance is responsible for that shooting, or that was just an empty talking point that Republicans are using to diffuse responsibility off of themselves for the violent rhetoric that they themselves have embraced. Take all the time you need with that one. What Republicans are trying to do is suppress a potent attack against Trump by wrongly attributing Trump's fascist desires to the shooting. This way, no one on the left will be able to rightfully call him a fascist because suddenly that's an incitement to violence, which sure is convenient for Republicans, but it is completely baseless. Let's be clear, that is not the rationale for the shooting. There is zero indication that the shooter was seeking to assassinate him because of Trump's fascism or because of any Democratic rhetoric whatsoever. That is nothing more than Republicans picking something out of thin air to blame on the left, all to help themselves politically. Same story, different day. The reality is that far from feeling shame for calling Donald Trump a fascist, it is Trump who has advocated violence as a political tool for years and years and years. It was him, not us, who said he would pay his supporters legal bills if they beat up protesters at his rally. It was him, not us, who mocked Paul Pelosi after he was bludgeoned by some lunatic with a hammer. It was him, not us, who called for Liz Cheney to face military tribunals. It was him, not us, who called for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, to be executed. It was him, not us, who reposted a photo of a baseball bat next to Alvin Bragg and threatened death and destruction if he was charged. It was him, not us, who reposted an image of Joe Biden hogtied in the bed of a truck. It was him, not us, who laughed off a kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer at the hands of right-wing militants. We oppose Trump and Trump's fascism, not because we are advocating for violence, but precisely because we oppose it. We oppose this brand of politics, we oppose this brand of radicalization, we oppose this brand of rhetoric. So let's not get it twisted. Only one side is using violent rhetoric, and it sure as hell isn't the left. And yet you'll notice that when Jessica Tarlov brings up these examples of dangerous and violent rhetoric coming from the right, what does Greg Gutfeld do? He calls them hilarious. In other words, it's not only acceptable, but funny when the right advocates for violence, but when a Republican is the victim, at the hands of another Republican, no less, suddenly the Democrats warning about the rightful dangers of an avowed fascist are to blame. If the tables were turned and Joe Biden laughed at and reposted a picture of Trump being hogtied in the bed of a truck, do you think Greg Gutfeld would think it was hilarious? Or do you think Fox News would accuse Biden of grooming his supporters to turn into would-be assassins for a week straight? If you answered the former, then you're either lying to yourself or so deep in Fox's propaganda that you've lost your ability to think independently. So good on Jessica Tarlov for not allowing the right to blame the left for violence that the right has normalized. Because let's be clear, you can either support someone like Donald Trump and the things he says, or you can disavow political violence, but you can't do both. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.